Hello, everybody, and welcome back to This Is the Year, the Swiss AI Engineering Podcast. And yet again, today with me, João from Lisbon. We are talking about a few things today. We're talking about specialized language models, specifically a new model that came out from OpenAI that was pretty mind-blowing in the world of biology. We kick things off, though, in today's episode around vibe coding. I've been vibe coding, or probably I've been doing vibe coding since a while. And I think this was a time that after a few months again, we would want to give a bit of an update about the world of vibe coding, what has changed and what might we be seeing in the future. Quickly also talk about some new concept that's, well, actually been around for a few months already, but large language models as a judge. How do these models really make sure the outputs are correct? And then we round things off with a guessing game on who is selling the most chips to NVIDIA. So that's the high-level outline. João, how is life? How is Lisbon? Currently in Switzerland, very rainy, so you might win the weather competition today.
You're finally winning the weather. I mean, Lisbon has a pretty good sense in terms of being a nice place to be in, weather-wise. But it is sunny. It is a really good place to build AI agents. If you want to come down here, make your startup. We have a pretty good startup ecosystem. The city has been trying to be the new Silicon Valley for Europe for a while now. You have some action in terms of new startups appearing, startups disappearing. I think it's part of how startups are supposed to go. They're not supposed to have a really long life cycle.
Part of the up and down. You guys also have the Web Summit. That's always a nice encounter. I think the last 2 years I participated in some of these. Maybe there's an AI Summit. So who is ever out there in the audience?
I think there are a few different conferences on AI. They keep doing them. I think it's around the same spot that they do the Web Summit in. The city gets a bit chaotic. And we have notifications on our public transportation app saying, hey, there's this big conference. People will be here. Traffic will be a bit.
Be aware. I think there is many conferences. That's true. Currently, there's all over the place. I think next week I'm going to an AWS conference in Zurich. So I'm looking really forward to that. Maybe I can loop in a few insights that was shared from the hyperscaler, one of the big winners currently. But yeah, let's get started with the first topic, vibe coding. João, you're not the biggest fan of vibe coding, so let me take that first. Just from all the new people in the audience on vibe coding, what is vibe coding? Vibe coding is coding without code, basically with textual interaction, and that's basically where the nuance lies. You probably still have to have some understanding of what actually to prompt a vibe coding tool to really yielding great results. So you might need to know the stack, you might need to know particular libraries the vibe coding tool should be using. Otherwise, it just is a bit of a spaghetti vibe coding result. So maybe just from a high level, there's a few tools. We've shared them multiple times here on the podcast. The notable ones are Replit, Lovable, and my personal favorite, which, quick disclaimer, I probably will be shooting a lot more tutorials of how to actually vibe code maybe the way we think it should be done with Versal V0. So that's really, I would say, the most corporate ready prototyping / vibe coding tool. You can easily dock N8N, a no coding platform for AI agent development, to it. Again, I hopefully will cover that in the next few months, and some videos are coming out there. I think something that particularly changed as an update for you to know, João, again, you're not using these tools too much, is that there are some integrations. And I think that's really, really nice. What's your newest take, João, on vibe coding?
I know that there are a lot of mixed feelings about vibe coding. I think it's been, and like this feeling in the community of coders and programmers and engineers, it's been rising that like vibe coding is equal to shitty coding. There's like that feeling of like the LLM can possibly write as good a code as the experienced guys. As an experienced guy myself, I am struggling with keeping the superiority complex because I have been using vibe coding sometimes. I think I do it around 50-50.
That's new to me. Back in the day, you were completely against vibe coding.
I mean, back in the day, it wasn't as good as it is now. I think if you're doing like vibe coding, pure vibe coding, so you're not touching the code, you don't really understand the code, then you're setting yourself up for failure for big projects. I think you can pull off like a quick website for your own personal portfolio. You're a business person, you want to have your website to show off a bit, have you in your CV, do it. Vibe coding works for you. You're setting up a platform for like a few thousand people. It has to scale, it has to deploy, it has to be somewhat safe with login and users and actual user data. Then maybe know a bit of coding, learn a bit. It's not that hard, and you'll do better. But I've been using vibe coding, and it's getting better. And I've been using mostly the Microsoft Copilot. I mean, I got access to a lot of different LLMs. I keep trying different LLMs for different tasks, see what they do best. I like the intelligence of GPT-5. I like the intelligence of Gemini 2.5 Pro. I prefer the style of Claude. I think Anthropic has been making these Claude models specifically, not specifically for coding, but really optimized for coding too. And they're just really verbose. And that might not be a great thing if you're paying for every single token that they're outputting, but it's really a great thing if you're coding with them. They'll tell you and they'll explain every step of the way, so you're never really lost. So you can read what's happening and understand their process. It's even quicker to read than to write the code yourself, so it's still a major win.
Maybe just to add on that, I think something that I saw as a change, maybe that actually changes over time once again, but at the beginning of vibe coding, you had to be very general about what you actually want. And now the more general you are, the more it does whatever it kind of think it's correct. So it might build all these libraries. Like, for example, today, I might quickly can put up a screenshot of this particular UI that I specifically said, build it in React, Tailwind, like all these particular keywords with a backend on Java Spring Boot, like some proper corporate backend lingo. And it then went on and did it. But if me not mentioning that, it just did whatever. And it looked pretty well, vibe coding 1.0 and not 2.0. So I think, yes, vibe coding is still an absolutely amazing prototyping tool, and maybe sometimes, depending on the software, even a production-ready tool, but you have to be more and more specific on the prompt. Otherwise, these system prompts, these generalized instructions will just maybe do whatever. So you really have to be very specific. One thing that usually works really well is upload wireframes, so basically sketches of the UI. That pretty much nails it. And then the chatbot interactions are also super nice. So if you don't say specifically, especially in Versal v0, I am going to include my own backend or my own no-coding platform and API hooks from N8N, it kind of goes off and does some LangChain, some LangGraph components, and they don't run. That's kind of the problem I saw. So specifically prompted to say, okay, just please do the front end, the back end in Spring Boot, and the front end in React. But please be aware, I will then simply dock the 8N AI agent engine via simple API prompt once again. Otherwise, it does whatever. So that's kind of something I learned. Be specific. And for that, you need to know a little bit more than just the basics on maybe business. You need to know a little bit about the lingo, and you need to know a little bit about the stack. So that's, for me, a cool plus. Quick shout out once again. More videos to come. We have another topic quickly prepared for you guys. Large language models. Last time we talked quickly about small language models, or SLMs, that might be specifically trained for a particular case. These ones that we're mentioning today are still probably considered large language models. Which one do you have as an update? From Switzerland, quick disclaimer.
From Switzerland, I mean, there's a new LLM, they call it Apertus model, and it is made by Switzerland, I think for Switzerland. They trained it on their own dataset, they curated it, they ran it through really large data center, I think within Switzerland, and it is surprisingly good at Swiss languages. So you might think, oh, Swiss, they speak German, so should be good enough at German. But Swiss German is an entirely different language than the High German that you're used to. French German has...
We take pride in that.
The Swiss French has some quirks compared to the usual France's French, and also the Italian, and also Romansh, which is an official Swiss language. But I think no general use LLM is pretty good at it because it's a really niche language.
I mean,
I don't think
humans,
even you, Cyril.
Not many humans. I don't speak Romansh, and not many humans do either.
However, this model does. I mean, it's a part of the dataset. They train it to be good at Swiss languages, and that includes Romansh. It might be a pretty good option if you're building a custom center for some Swiss business. It's an open source model. You can deploy it however you want, make it safe, make it deployable within your own system, and you can natively understand the languages people are speaking. Of course, it won't be as good or as intelligent as a GPT-5 or a Claude model or a Gemini model, but it'll be open source. It will be trained for Swiss languages. And then again, for customer support, it really doesn't rely on intelligence. It relies on the context you give it over your own business. So you're selling donuts, you want some kind of agent to get orders from online. You don't need the agent to do super complicated math. You do the agent to understand your business, know what donuts you're selling, and be able to guide the customer to your menu and get the order and put it in your system. For most cases, I think this might be a pretty good option. It's a matter of trying it for yourself, see if it does what you want, and then deploy it. in your own safe environment, as we've talked about in a previous episode.
We have Swiss engineered running shoes. That's been around for a few years. Many people thought there's only Nike and maybe Adidas, but on running is also. And now we even have Swiss engineered large language models, which again, we can put on the screen here. If you're curious just to try it out, it is open source. You can use it in your European or even global software as a service from this time onward. The second one we can mention quickly as a new model release, I mentioned it initially, it's from OpenAI. So OpenAI, of course, super famous, launching GPT-5. Some people said it's not the biggest breakthrough in history of AI, but this one seemed pretty interesting. It's called GPT-4b Micro, and it's specifically trained with data coming from the biology world, more precisely, maybe I'm butchering this word, but the Yamanaka factors. So basically a set of proteins that are in relation to stem cells. Stem cells, then again, are in relation to rejuvenation, and that's the whole world of aging. There is a huge set of potential combinations of these Yamanaka factors. I think the person that discovered that even won a Nobel Prize. And this particular large language model is helping to decode certain patterns of how we could combine them to, again, yield potential aging benefits. So this is really the first time, at least to my best knowledge, that a model can come up with, outside of maybe DeepMind from Google, with AlphaFold as well. But the large language model, I think it's the first probably biological use case that was pretty interesting that we can talk to, and it helps us in the research procedures. Once again, it's just the initial, maybe first use case. If we progress that a few years in the future, that's exactly what we've been saying all the time. It take a little bit more time to train these specialized large language models for these specialized use cases. But this one was a pretty interesting one. I don't believe it's actually available on API yet, but maybe sure you can correct me if you know. Otherwise, we have to look it up.
These kinds of really specialized models, and I think we'll be seeing more and more of them, because, like you said, GPT-5 was good, but not the breakthrough that they hyped. I mean, it was pretty hard to match the hype that they did. So you won't see GPT-6 that soon, or Claude 5, or Gemini 3. And I'm saying this as an educated guess. I don't do futurology. That Gemini 3.0 might launch tomorrow. I don't think it will. But you won't see these many new models from the major providers, because the models that have are already pretty good and they can do most things. I think it's a matter of now doing context engineering, building software and building products around them. So in this space, you will see new models coming out for smaller companies or specialized models for doing biology research, math research, Swiss language research. I think because you'll have a lot of research now, a lot of white papers coming out how to do these models in open source way. There's datasets available, there's architectures available, so it gets easier and easier to fine-tune these models. I still don't think fine-tuning is the best way forward for the normal use cases. If you're building your own AI agent, fine-tuning should be your last resource. It's still an expensive thing to do. It's still a couple millions, and some highly educated and PhD personnel that you need to have on your team. But people do have that money. People do have that interest. So you will have specialized models and you'll see cool things coming out of it. I think a few weeks ago, we got some brand new mathematical proofs for an unsolved problem from an LLM. And a couple of days afterwards, I think a human not only verified the proof for the LLM, but found an even better proof than the LLM did. But at the time that LLM did that proof, it was the best proof available for that specific problem. I'm not going to get super into details because the mathematical world is it has a lot of buzzwords that don't sound super great, especially for people outside of mathematics. So I'm not going to bore you with it, but it was a brand new proof, and it's pretty innovating to see an LLM coming with something totally brand new. And I think we will be seeing from different fields, biology, chemistry, physics. Hopefully they don't use it for weapons research, although they might and they will, because there's money to be made in that, but also for things to help humanity progress and move forward. But then again, it's where the money is. I think it's where the LLMs will be. It's a very expensive process.
I hope we don't have to go too much into these fields. I think one notion just quickly associated to that, of course, is the validation of outputs coming out of these LLMs. And we briefly touched upon, once again, many different models. There is this concept of large language models as a judge, because at the end of the day, we've mentioned it multiple times here on the show, you don't want the LLM just to be rogue and do whatever he or it kind of wants to do. You would want to have some oversight, color nuances in the cloud as well already. So guardrails, for example, you can more or less correctly put it into a particular corner with prompts. But also there is a notion of you might have a second supervisor, or sometimes it's referred to as a judge, overseeing a particular track in actions, as well as maybe generally speaking a particular output. What's your maybe general understanding, Joao, on LLMs as a judge, something you would put in at any given agentic AI these days if you're an AI builder in the audience, or you would only put it in specialized occasions?
I think as soon as your product reaches a level of maturity, I think if it reaches a certain level of people, especially if it's customer facing, like if you're building an internal tool, then maybe it's fine, it's good enough. But if it's customer facing, then you're competing with other companies and you want it to be as good as possible, as best as can possibly make it. And like I said, you won't be getting any brand new models anytime soon, at least that fast. And even if you do, there's this thing where if you build an AI agent from scratch, right? You're a company, you're building, you could say like a customer support agent. You have some restrictions on what models you have available for yourself. Maybe you want to deploy your own models, like you pick some up with open source models. Maybe you use some models that are already deployed. You build it around that model. And so you do some context engineering, you build data sets to test it, you have some people test it out and feel it's okay. However, during production, in your day-to-day, people are going to use it and it's very hard to read. And maybe you shouldn't have access even to every session that's happening in your platform. 1,000 people are having chats with ChatGPT every day. OpenAI doesn't have the people to read every chat and see how the model's doing and just writes a little bit of feedback saying, hey, maybe we should improve on this. So LLM-as-a-Judge becomes, I think, the obvious answer to all of this is have this automated system to look over the chat sessions or whatever your agent's doing. Like maybe it's working through some emails, calendars, events, working through your like finance reports, see what the goal was, what the agent did, and did it align. Did the model go off track? Did the model do the right thing? Or did it start to hallucinate? So you can measure all these things. Because hallucinations are less common now, but are still very much a possibility. They still very much happen. And with LLM-as-a-Judge, you can keep a track of this. Maybe you can't stop it halfway, but you can have a control and have a rating and have these kinds of metrics. But after a week, after a month, you can say maybe only 2% of the chats that happened had hallucinations on them. Or maybe 1% of times that we ran this financial analysis agent, maybe only 1% of the times it was wrong about something. So it's a really good system. And once you have it in place, then you can change your system, you can upgrade it and have a real metric if your system is better or not. Because it's very hard to test them out. I mean, you can have 100 people using them every day, running the exact same questions. And sometimes, most of the times, you'll be getting different answers. So having this automation is, I think, super useful.
It's kind of the same in the human world, right? So you have some sort of a team lead or a reviewer or 4i review in the financial world. Same in AI. So you have a large language model, once again, as a judge judging the output. And these outputs now, they're not only maybe text-based, but there maybe is a suggested part of action the agent wants to be doing. And there might be some in the middle person, aka the judge, basically approving these actions, and that you're also not wasting particular money actually. So the AI cannot just go rogue, waste you a lot of money, but you actually can gatekeep a little bit the actionality. Maybe associated to this, just quickly, we talked briefly before the show, and I thought it might make sense to drop that as well. I'm currently preparing a few new slides on the course I'm teaching on artificial intelligence. I would just very briefly highlight maybe 5 or 6 papers in the description of this video. Actually, maybe in the first comment. I will put it in the first comment. If you can give it a like, and then we also see maybe you like these types of papers. If you have other suggestions, please feel free to drop a comment down there. These papers are more or less 2025 January onward, and these are like the most, I would say, nuanced ways of how you get into AI in 2025. Last question to you, Joao. Any favorite papers from your end today?
Favorite papers. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of research on how to train these models. There's some breakthroughs on the optimization of how to train them. And this seems sometimes a little bit niche to the people outside of the AI world, especially outside of the AI research world. But what this means to people that don't want to bother reading a really big PDF, is that it's getting a bit cheaper and a bit faster to train these models, which makes it available and it makes it possible for smaller companies to train these models. Which means in the very near future, maybe in the near to medium future, you will be able to have a medium company train your own LLM and have some like real assets, AI assets that not only you can sell and you can make a business out of it, but you can use in your own system. So you don't have to rely on OpenAI, you don't have to rely on Claude, you don't have to rely on external models that may have a bias or may have some hallucinations regarding your company. I think it's a really good thing, especially even for the GPTs, Geminis, and Claudes of our everyday, because it means these companies, if they make use of this research, can train better and bigger models without buying a whole lot more GPUs or without using a whole lot of more power, because then again, we can only produce so much power every day. So if we make it a little bit less power hungry, then all the better for us.
So you're suggesting that many new companies in 2026 and onward are training their own large language or maybe small language models.
I think
That
many
could
new
be
companies
interesting.
will be hiring PhDs to train these models. I'm not sure if the models will launch in 2026 or if the trend will maintain, but it's definitely a very intense area, I think, for HR in the near future to get these people, because there are not a whole lot of people outside like this podcast and outside like some elite universities that know how to build LLMs from scratch or know how to train them and how to optimize them for businesses.
I mean, if I could draw an ideal future, I would even be mentioning that, like currently where we can think about it, there is always the design time and then the runtime of large language models. So there is the design time where you train them, where you come up with your proprietary data, you take a lot of Wikipedia data and so on and so forth, Reddit and all the other data sources you might be able to find. But maybe in the future, this isn't really necessary. So the design time is actually maybe just on the meta learning. So you give these large language or whatever these models are called in the future, the tool set to learn in the real world. So of course, there is this notion on reinforcement learning, but I think in the future, hopefully we get to a point where the models itself learns most of the context where it's actually embedded in, and we just train them on design time, giving them the kind of the meta concepts, maybe the meta tools of maybe then ongoingly learning, interacting with the environment. That's maybe something I see more happening as opposed to we keep training and training and training these models all the time and each and every year. But then when they are in runtime, meaning they're actually used in production, they're used to conversate with clients and your internal stakeholders, they're maybe not really improving automatically by themselves. That's maybe just if I have to shout at 2030 what hopefully is happening in the world of AI, we should maybe stick away from, again, training and then inference and then retraining a new one and then inference, to maybe just training a general purpose, super broad meta learner, and then we can delve them, the AIs, into the domains we want them to. For example, in finance, then it knows kind of, okay, the basics on finance, and it can improve itself to become better. That's maybe a little bit of a simpler approach. I don't know.
I mean, reinforcement learning has been a hot topic in AI even before LLMs came around. You're having really good models to play like Dota and play even board games against the world champions at that game, and it was beating them based mostly on reinforcement learning. So now we're seeing reinforcement learning being applied to LLMs, keep pushing it a step further, getting smarter than what the data allows. So maybe they know everything that's on Wikipedia, and now they're getting a bit smarter than what is on Wikipedia so that they can write the new pages, the new knowledge for us.
I mean, I thought that's basically what we do, humans, right? So we go to school from, say, 7 to 28 or 24, I don't know.
I think you went to school a bit too long. 28, I think.
I
you
actually
may have been
graduated
held
at
back
28.
for a couple of years.
I had to multiple times take the math courses to actually graduate. No, I actually graduated, I think, what was it, 26 or 27. And the same concept we can apply to AI. So we are going to uni to apply, to actually learn and study the meta concept of how we learn, as opposed to we hardly ever apply anything from university these days. Of course, the basics, but it's the same in AI. So if you can give them the capability to be a meta learner and then just equip them with the tools, then they can interact, like you mentioned, with reinforcement learning approaches. This is probably, hopefully, the time and the place we are heading into, maybe 2030. Once again, I will put the papers. Maybe you can also send me a few you like, and I'll put them into the comments below this video. Let's
So you
quickly
change the podcast title instead of "This is the year" is 2030 is the year. Because you've mentioned the year like 2030 a couple times now, and I'm thinking maybe that's a reference.
I was checking this 2027-ai.com website. They have like a simulation on what is happening until 2030, and it was pretty mind-blowing. Maybe I can put that also on the screen here quickly. That's why I have this 2030 in my mind. There's like these two scenarios that you can choose on this simulator. What's happening until there? There's the agents, PhD research levels, and they're actually running the research. And then 2030, there's like this segue. It's going super rogue, or it's going super, I think, pro-humanity. I don't know why. Probably it's because of that. I have that in my mind. 2030, it's the year. Every year is the year until 2030. Last game show for today, NVIDIA revenue split. We quickly covered the earnings report from NVIDIA last week. So far, the stock has been a little bit underperforming. That might come up with different nuances regarding the tariffs as well in the States. There was this lawsuit against actually the president that he doesn't have the power to impose these tariffs, and potentially maybe the United States of America have to pay back the tariff revenue. But let's see, TBD. There is still new insecurities in the market, and that's maybe why NVIDIA is falling a little bit. But one particular domain that was opened in this particular earnings report was that NVIDIA doesn't have many clients. There's only a few names. Of course, the names were not itself mentioned, but there was some sort of association how much percentage these people and corporations might actually be purchasing from NVIDIA. So who did you get? 1, 2, 3 most?
I mean, we know that they are they've been, I think they might change in the near future, but they've been the go-to guy to get GPUs for AI, right? I mean, they had pretty much a monopoly on this market. So the biggest GPU people I can think of is Meta. They've been advertising and they've been really bullish on showing off their Llama models, and they've been saying like it's trained on a few thousand GPUs, or sometimes hundreds of thousands of GPUs, and each GPU, for the person who's not buying them in the audience, it's sometimes 20 and 40K for a single GPU. So if you have a few 100,000 of each one of all of them, you might think it might run up a couple $1 billion in your data center. So Amazon, Microsoft, I think XAI was also like one of the clients of them. NVIDIA, I think they do have a lot of clients, but there's only a handful that make up like the top 80% of their sales. I think 2 of their clients was roughly 40% of their sales, only 2 entities, 2 companies. I don't think it's a single person buying that much GPUs. So it makes sense, especially for the gamers out there seeing the GPU prices. If they're trying to build their own like gaming rig, that the GPU prices are impossible. That's because NVIDIA is not really focused on selling for consumers. I mean, all the money is in selling to these businesses. We don't know who they are. My top 2 bets for these top 2 companies, top 2 customers from NVIDIA, I think it's Microsoft, because they do have a big budget. They do have to run the GPTs for businesses, and I think I'll go with Meta, because they do have a lot of money. And if they had a lot of money to spend on researchers, and we've covered it, that they were trying to build their super intelligence team with millions of dollars of bonuses for these researchers, maybe they do have a couple million more to spend on GPUs. Those are my top 2 bets. And you, Cyril?
It's a reasonable guess. Maybe with exclusion of 2 particular maybe domains. First of all, it can't be China because it hasn't been accounted for, sales to China. And also Google is probably out. They have their own TPU, so they have their own silicon they're actually running the models on. So probably these 2 are out. Same with AWS. They have Trainium, but they probably still buy a lot of NVIDIAs as well. XAI, I would probably put as number 2. And you might probably be right with Meta being number 1. I don't know. We never know. But I would say...
I'd actually say Microsoft is number 1.
You actually said Microsoft.
I think Microsoft, then Meta.
What about OpenAI? Do you account them in Microsoft, or that's a separate entity, of course?
I think Microsoft, because I think Microsoft OpenAI is running their servers through Microsoft. I think they have like an exclusivity deal. Happens like a couple of years ago. This wild like hostile takeover of OpenAI by Microsoft that didn't really get noticed by people outside of the AI world. But it did happen. There was quite a few different scandals, like back to back in a couple of weeks. Then a month later, Microsoft had an exclusivity deal with OpenAI. We don't know what happened. It's very closed doors kind of thing. But as far as I know, OpenAI servers are hosted on Azure from Microsoft. So Microsoft has to get GPUs to host everything in OpenAI and to host everything from all their businesses that want to use the GPT models, because they're only available either directly through OpenAI.com or through Azure.
So we have Microsoft 1, maybe Meta XAI, and number 2, and number 3, somebody else. I mean, there are so many different players that are using these chips. Oracle is probably in the game, and they have these large initiatives in the US as well. And maybe there is just some invisible other player that we don't account for. I don't see Apple on this list whatsoever. They don't seem to train their own, at least large language models. They might have some future deals coming up, especially after the Google announcement that just happened yesterday. But maybe more on that in the second set of maybe the next show. We can cover that as well.
That Apple is playing it suspiciously slow on the AI world. They had a couple different news last week. They came out just after we recorded the podcast. Actually, they're launching some AI models, not LLMs. They're not launching their own ChatGPT, don't worry, but some AI models for captioning videos and some video content. So they're focused on features that they can put on iPhones and iPads. They're not going full on or full in on the AI world just yet.
Well,
maybe they will.
They haven't spent tens of billions on training models, while other companies maybe haven't fully monetized these investments either. Or maybe that's why they're waiting.
Maybe they're smart ones. Who knows?
Maybe they are actually the smart ones. They're waiting until the AGI is here and just probably copy paste it, train it, and then ship it. That might be a really good play for Apple. Let's see.
They're just getting the funds together so they can hire all the top guys when the time is just right. Meta tried to do it very early in the game. They hired people left a couple weeks afterwards, back to OpenAI, back to XAI. So maybe Apple is like trying to time it just right. We'll see.
They do have the device distribution, they do have the platform. Everything seems to be aligning. They also have the virtual reality. And yeah, let's see. I would be super curious to see where we actually stand on Apple in 2030. Joe, anything else from your side for this, once again, rather random episode? We went through vibe coding. We talked about specialized LLMs. We talked about GPT-4b micro. We quickly shed light on LLM-as-a-Judge, papers to start, and NVIDIA revenue. Today was everything packaged in one episode.
I mean, NVIDIA revenue is not about NVIDIA as much as it is trying to figure out who's betting the most on AI. Apple isn't one of them. We already mentioned who could it be. I think there's a lot of some news we'll see in the future, and we're teasing it for the next episodes. Be the Chinese players that are entering the market, because as the US economy is a bit in a dubious state right now, it opens the door for all the Chinese players. We're seeing Chinese chips for AI because they weren't in the market before, and they have a really high motivation to get started on that. So we have some news on that. The next episode, we'll see. But for now, I think we covered the weekly news and some prospects for the future.
Exactly. Good. That's a roundup. I think we can call it a wrap. Another episode in the making will be next week already. And I mentioned it at the beginning. Hopefully more videos to come, mostly on tutorial side of things on this channel. So if that's something you want to see more of, consider subscribing, liking, and dropping a comment if we should be covering something. Also, we are active on LinkedIn. Feel free to drop us a DM if you have a question or anything associated to AI. We're very happy to answer to that. So see you in the next one, Joao.
See you around.